Hey everybody, good evening. Stan Garland here, professional life coach and certified financial counselor, giving you a little bit of knowledge on this Friday evening. It's been a beautiful day. The afro is popping and the smile is locked in, and you are here for the Blue Chair Chronicles episode 2. Why is it called the Blue Chair Chronicles? Because I'm sitting in a blue chair. Hey, ho, hey, snow. If you know, you know. Chili Peppers 15, I think. Bad puns for a Friday evening. So what is on my mind today, and what are we going to be talking about? The last episode, if you haven't watched it, was about PTSD and car buying and how you can use money to sometimes coax or soothe the things that go on in your brain. And I talked a little bit about my car buying addiction that I had and about how not to be me, because I have a PhD from the University of Idiots. And you don't want a PhD in that. That's absolutely the worst thing you could ever do. So even us financial counselors and life coaches, we've gone through some hell. So if you don't have a counselor or a life coach or a financial counselor that hasn't been through some ish, you got to find a new counselor. I'm just being real. And so I'm going to talk a little bit today about bankruptcy and about bad decisions and about how to come back from bankruptcy. And bankruptcy honestly used to be this word in the financial realm. And I was like, ooh, you don't want to do that. Bankruptcy is horrible. Don't do it. Well, in reality, bankruptcy is a fresh restart because guess what? We're human. We're fallen creatures, as some people would say. We make mistakes. And it is important to, first of all, when it comes to financial counseling and well-being, is to not beat yourself up. I've worked with probably a few thousand people now since I've done private practice, and I've also worked in the federal government. I still do work in the federal government, and I help people with their money. I help people understand this thing that they use to exchange their time for to get the dollars. And a lot of people's money in their pocketbooks are out of balance because of one thing, y'all: choices. And it's simple, but it's one of the hardest things that, like, if you don't understand and grasp choices, you will live your life in a state of confusion. Genesis talked about that back in the day, with Phil Collins and the Homeboys in it. State of confusion. A lot of people on our planet today are merely existing instead of living. They're in survival mode instead of driving and being in a place of abundance. And these are people I've met who are millionaires and those who want to make $30,000 a year. Wealth is a mindset. Now, of course, it does deal with pocketbooks and money and the exchange of money for goods and services. But for the most part, I've met some poor people who are millionaires because they're bankrupt here. I've met some people who make 40 grand who have 50 grand saved up and they just lived on nothing. They drove an old '05 Camry, they tuned it up and they kept it moving, and they just pocketed every single piece of change they had. So I want to talk about money today. I want to talk about how to gain momentum with your money because, man, it's rough out here. And I want to talk about bankruptcy and how you can recover from it. So a little bit about me. Prior Air Force. I did 8 years in the Air Force. I was a cop for 4 of them. Combat toured Afghanistan, which was, as you can guess, pretty brutal. We'll talk about PTSD more in this journey. And then another 4 years in the Chaplain Assistant Corps, which is more like religious freedoms, helping people have the space to create and to use their faith in a way that makes their life meaningful. I did 8 years in the Air Force, got out, and they released me back in 2014. And then I was unemployed for a year. I had my master's, felt this big, so pain. I was living in Texas at that time with my ex-wife. Worked at a community college, met some amazing humans there that I'm still friends with these days, that I got into the federal government in 2016. And that's where my wealth really started to take off, and my mistakes. Because money, 2 things are going to happen. So let's talk about this. Poor mindset, rich mindset. If you grew up poor like me, which I have amazing parents and they worked their butt off to get us to middle class. But if you grow up poor and then eventually you get money, for example, I went from growing up poor to middle class, then I worked at fast food, and then I went into the military for 8 years. You're going to do one of 2 things. You're either going to save your money and stack the bag, or you're going to overspend it on junk that's not even relevant anymore. I can't even tell you the amount of headphones and stuff and junk that I have that is not even here from 2010. The only thing that I probably would have from 2010 is my drum set. But everywhere I moved, from Texas to Alaska and back to South Carolina, I gave that away. So I have nothing from that time frame apart from a few t-shirts from some youth ministry conferences I did. Stuff does not matter. It really doesn't. Don't chase stuff. Don't chase the feeling of things. I'm slightly bougie, and I like nice things. I got my chain on today. I got my watches and my bling. But like, I bought that with extra money I made from my investments, not from the budget I used for sustaining my quality of life. So you got to figure out how you grew up with money first, and then you got to look at your patterns of behavior. So if you grew up poor, you're going to either become super stingy and not spend anything, or you're going to become overspend and be in debt. And that's what happened to me. So don't be me. So you really got to think about it. Like, money and psychology go hand in hand together. So if you want to be wealthy, you got to first budget. So you got to budget 1, and 2, you got to be patient, and 3, you got to invest. So instead of chasing stuff, chase investments. And you can still have fun and budget along the way. And we're going to get into budgeting and what that looks like and how to budget here as I continue these episodes. But first, you got to understand your money, your mind, how you use it. And you also have to have a why for your money. Because a lot of people come to me with their budgets. Like, Stanley, I don't know. I'm sitting here and I am living paycheck to paycheck. I'm like, how much you make? 40 to 60K. Okay. We do a down and dirty simple budget. And a budget should be no more than 10 minutes. The first time around, unless you got a lot of assets and you got businesses, you probably need an Excel spreadsheet or some sort of advanced program to keep everything in line. So they say, hey, Stan, man, I got to do my budget. And then they say, we get to the budget done, we look at everything, we do minimum payments on everything, no extra payments, and we build a budget for the next month. And usually there's a surplus unless they're really, really in debt, somewhere between $500 to $1,100. For people who are making $40,000 to $60,000. And they're like, where's that going? I'm like, that's the question. So I experienced that, living paycheck to paycheck, making $60,000 to $80,000 a few years ago. And I was like, where's my money going? It was going to junk because my mind wasn't right. And if your mind ain't right, ain't nothing going to be tight. So you got to make sure this is in order. Now that's going to require maybe you have to be humble. You're going to have to get some counseling. You may have to work with a life coach or a counselor and find somebody to help you kind of sift through the chaos in your mind. That's what I do. I help people find stability in the midst of their suffering, so we can get from the suffering to the blessing. You know what I'm saying? So budgeting, that is like the core of finances and money. Every millionaire I've met has told me one thing, and it's one constant: budget. The second constant is live on less than you make, and the third constant is investing. You do those 3 things, you will become wealthy. But you have to make sure this is right. For example, yours truly served in Afghanistan, and in serving in Afghanistan, I got PTSD from the war. So that led me to overspend because I was on meds that would make me feel worse, and I wasn't finding the right medication to work with me. I didn't have the best of doctors, and so some of it was medicine, it was in chemical imbalances. Some of it was just bad habits, and I really had to look at myself and be like, what is going on? So I was $179,000 in debt. Let me repeat that. 179K, y'all. Back in 2022, I was going through a divorce, had to leave my son in Alaska, moved back down to South Carolina. Parents gave me their second crib. I paid their mortgage for a little while. I had to get right, and I filed bankruptcy. That's what happens when you have a patriarch in your family. Sometimes you got to go back home, you got to recover, and you got to rest. I was making 6 figures, but I was squandering it in Alaska. And it wasn't until I couldn't buy any more cars with my credit and that I was so far in debt that I could cry that reality gave me a Mike Tyson punch to the face. And the fight's tonight, too. That's kind of funny. With him and Jake Paul, I think. I may watch it. We'll see. Little Mike Tyson punch out. But I had to get back home and I had to recalibrate. Sometimes you may have to do that. And guess what? It was a little bit embarrassing going on dates with women and saying, hey, yeah, I'm living in my parents' house. And even though they weren't living there and I was sharing it with my sister, it does hit the psyche. I had to swallow the humble pie. I had to really look at myself and say, self, you're making good money, but you can't out earn stupidity. So if you heard nothing else tonight that I'm saying with this big afro and this craziness, I'm yelling at you, hitting you with some positivity, don't be me. Like, you cannot out earn your stupidity unless you're a multimillionaire or a billionaire. But even then, the more money you get, the mistakes get bigger. Look at all the people who win the lotto. They buy Lambo, they go to all these extravagant parties with these ladies who don't care about them or these men that don't care about them. And 5-10 years later, they have nothing. They're back doing the same job over and over again because of this. The mind is a heaven or it's a hell. It's a paradise or it's a wasteland. You got to make sure your mind is being watered with proper knowledge and information and make it a paradise to live in. Even though you may not be where you want to be financially tonight, what are we going to do to get there? If you need help, give me a shout. Because I know for some people, my energy is off the roof. I love this stuff. I come alive. So if you want that, just drop a comment down in the video. And I would love to reach out to you and we can coordinate a one-on-one coaching session. Because that's what I do. I help people elevate their lives. So I filed bankruptcy, right? And it was hard. My credit tanked from like 7-something to like 550, y'all. Making 6 figures, credit score was like 550, and I was living in my parents' house, and I was like, this stings, But I got through it. I'm in my own place now, and my parents gave me a place to rebound, and I paid their mortgage, and I love them for it. I hope you have someone in your life that can do that for you. If you don't, hopefully you have a family friend or someone, because sometimes when dark times happen, you really have to take a year or 2, or maybe even 3, just to recalibrate. I had to take just 2.5 years just to recover from the divorce fees, from losing a woman that I really loved, and leaving my son in Alaska. And that's real, man. I had to get counseling. I still go to counseling on a weekly basis just to keep it tuned up. And now I'm in a place where I am elevating, and I'm not going to be a millionaire until I'm 55. I'm 38 now. And so even if you make your mistakes in your 30s, you get a divorce, you go through bankruptcy, like there's always an infinite amount of wealth in one place, and it's in your brain. The graveyard is the richest place in the world because it is filled with people who didn't fulfill their destiny. So we'll end with that. Bankruptcy you can recover from. But once you die, you don't have any more time to manifest your goals into reality. So take hold of that dream you have today. Make sure you budget. We'll dig into that more later. And I hope you have a great night. I'm going to dig into some pizza and enjoy my evening and drink a root beer. Maybe watch a little bit of anime. So thank you for joining me on this episode of the Blue Chair Chronicles. I hope you feel empowered and inspired and ready to go get it. Let's go. Episode 2 of the Blue Chair Chronicles. Have yourself a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.